Kentucky, and gathers, manages, and tests requirements for software projects. So his desire to make order out of chaos extends to his professional life. He's also explored joining the ranks of the National Association of Parliamentarians, but has not yet taken that plunge. I think you have to memorize the book.
Right.
He has been involved with Toastmasters since 2004 as a member of clubs in Louisville, Kentucky, Lexington, Kentucky. Well, I guess these are all Kentucky. Louisville, Lexington, Frankfort, Richmond, and Midway in Kentucky. He's currently serving as Division Governor of Bluegrass Division E.
This is going to be interactive, okay? Last session, I think we tried to get it interactive and it worked okay. But today we're really going to be interactive. But we'll get to that point in just a little bit. Have you ever been held hostage in a meeting where some self-appointed narcissist just drones on and on and on, and you're sitting there thinking, would you just please land the plane? Let's face it, we are all busy. Say it with me. We are all busy. Say it again. We are all busy. So every day we must make choices on how to spend our precious time. At work, at home, in civic organizations, and yes, even in Toastmasters. For me, and probably for you, suffering through an endless, unfocused, unproductive, and personality-dominated meeting ranks right down there with getting a root canal or claiming the toilets. Maybe you can identify this statement from Dave Barry, the humorist and syndicated columnist Miami Herald. You got to identify. Well, hang on a second.
Okay.
All right. If you had to identify in one word the reason why the human race has not achieved and will never achieve its full potential, that reason would be meetings. But there is a solution for bad meetings. We have a bright idea, and that solution is parliamentary procedure, Robert's Rules of Order. That's the solution. Basic premise underlying the Robert's Rules of Order is this: the rule of majority with respect for the minority. Kind of like democracy, if you think about it. But we only have a few minutes here today to cover this, and this is the official Robert's Rules Book of Order, 700 plus pages. So we only have a few minutes. We're going to cover some of the common things. And we're going to cover main motion, incidental motion, subsidiary motion, privilege motion, and you're probably sitting back there saying, oh my goodness, this is really boring. I should be in there listening to Lori first and talking about how to organize my closet. Or Kareem Ellis, I'm not just going there and find out how to take what I love and monetize that. Apparently, you guys drew the short straw here today. So here you are, learning about boring subject. Now say it with me. Boring, boring, boring. That is parliamentary procedure if you sit down and read the book and try to go through it. You know, I just noticed this, that the National Association of Parliamentarians, if you look at the acronym, which spells out what? N-A-P. Now, boring, boring, boring. So this is the boring stuff. Yeah, I'm not going to tell you about main motions and incidental motions, privilege motions, subsidiary motions, but why should I have all of them, right? Why should I have all of them? So let's play instead. I need to pass out the scripts, and what we're going to do is we're all going to participate here today. I think we have enough roles in our script, so we have 2 different scenarios we're going to play through today. Okay? And this might be something that's going to be difficult for our camera guy here, so you have to kind of play it by ear. So I guess a good idea would be to have our scenarios play out over here. So I need someone that can't be Cynthia since she's doing the PowerPoint. Well, maybe you could. I need someone to be Eileen James. Who would like to be Eileen James? There we go. You should have been her in the last meeting. Who wants to be Brenda Gaines?
You gave me two.
It doesn't matter, you're sure it's correct.
Oh, I don't know who that person is.
Who wants to be Brenda? Let's be Brenda. Who wants to be Steve Grant? Okay, Jim. I'm sorry. We have enough rows in the next one for everybody. Steve Grant. Okay.
You want to be Brenda?
All right, so everybody's up here?
Okay,
Got Brenda, okay.
Oh, we're gonna be
Got
out.
Brenda. Okay, so what we're gonna do
You want
is
us to be out?
I need you to come up here, and we're gonna be in a business meeting. So let's set up our business meeting right here. We have our leader, Eileen. Eileen's here, and we have our members, Brenda, Steve, come on up here. Can you get this? And unfortunately, Eileen, you're not sitting, you'll be standing. This is actually your podium.
Oh, gotcha.
This is your podium.
I wondered why I was
This is
sitting
your
with my
podium.
back
So
to
this is your meeting right here.
Okie dokie.
We have Brenda Gaines, right? Steve Grant, and Eileen James, right here. Okay, so at various points to this, we're going to make some statements and stop. So you guys see stop here. Let's go ahead.
Say stop for us? Or
Go ahead.
The meeting will now come to order.
Stop! Not very long, but. Okay, the facilitator must officially open the meeting. How many times have you been in a meeting where they just kind of meander into the beginning of the meeting? So a standard agenda will follow the statements that you're going to state right here. So go ahead and read the next sentence.
The secretary will read the minutes.
First, we have the minutes.
If there are no further corrections, the minutes are approved.
So we do the minutes, then now.
Now on to reports. May we have the treasurer's report?
We have all the different reports now. Go ahead.
And under unfinished business, the first item of business is the motion.
Okay, so there's a motion up here to handle unfinished business. A lot of times people call this old business, but technically the official wording should be unfinished business. Eileen.
Is there any new business?
I think it would be a great idea to send Bluegrass Division E Governor Steve Lanham to the International Convention in Malaysia next year.
Yeah, I do too.
Woo, wait a minute, you two are out of order.
Okay, let's raise the points here, okay? All right. Let's stop for a second. This is a formal business meeting. So we just can't bring up stuff and start talking about it like Steve and Brenda have just done. Now, this assembly has to follow this formal process, which is called the Robert's Rules of Order. So what we need to do is have a motion and have a second to the motion. Because if we just have someone bring up something and there's no second, then we might waste a lot of time discussing something that only one person is interested in. Have you ever been in a meeting like that that kind of just meanders? One person kind of hijacks the meeting and they're like, nobody else really wants to hear about it. The second thing is, and I've been guilty of this before, is Eileen incorrectly said, you are out of order. We want to take the personalities out of it and say your comments or your actions or your statements are out of order. Eileen.
I'm willing to entertain a motion if you would like to discuss this topic.
I make a motion that we send Bluegrass Division E Governor Steve Lanham to the International Convention in Malaysia next year.
Okay, sounds good to me, but we have to say something here. When I say I make a motion, again, that's not technically the right verbiage. You should say, I move that. Go ahead. Brenda?
Second.
Okay, here, there's no need for the chair to recognize the person making a second, so she can just yell that out. Go ahead.
Steve Grant, let me ask you a question. Are you saying that you want to pay the expenses for sending Steve Lanham to the convention?
Yes, that's what I'd like to do.
Then I suggest you include a maximum dollar amount for these expenses.
Great idea. I'd like to revise my motion. I move that we pay the expense up to $1,000 for sending Bluegrass Division E Governor Steve Lanham to the International Convention in Malaysia in 2014.
Brenda, are you okay with that change?
Yes, I am, Madam Chair.
Okay, so what we see here is we have a motion and a second, but the motion hasn't formally been presented to the assembly. So at this point, there could be some interchange and chatting, so to speak, between the presiding officer and the people that made the motion and seconded it. And it's important here sometimes to do that so you have a motion that's actually actionable and achievable. Because sometimes we make really bad motions, it takes forever to get them through because they're poorly worded, they don't really accomplish anything, and then you have a series of amendments and it just takes forever. We'll see that in the next exercise.
Okay, it is moved and seconded that our club pay the expenses up to $1,000 for sending Bluegrass Division E Governor Steve Lanham to the International Convention in Cincinnati, in Malaysia in 2014.
Yeah. You almost said Cincinnati there, didn't
Well,
you?
that's
I revised this. Okay, so now the chair has formally stated the motion, and the motion has become the property of not only you guys, but the assembly in general. So at this point, sometimes people like to say, well, can I make a friendly amendment? And in small gatherings, it's okay, but if you have a large formal meeting, friendly amendments at this point are not allowed, technically speaking.
Steve Grant, you now have the floor. Please state your reasons for making this motion.
Steve Lanham is a rising star in District 40. He has his finger on the pulse of our Toastmaster clubs. We cannot afford not to send him to the convention. Thank you.
Brenda, the chair now recognizes you.
Madam Chair, I am not in favor of paying for Steve Lanham's expenses to the convention. I think he is an insufferable, self-appointed know-it-all and would not uphold the reputation of our club at the International Convention or elsewhere. I wanted to go on record as opposing this motion.
Hold on there, Brenda. I thought you seconded this motion. Why are you saying those mean, slanderous things about my good friend and future Toastmaster of the Year, Steve Lanham?
Order! Steve Grant, your comments are out of order. You must be recognized by the chair before speaking, and besides, you've already had your opportunity to speak.
Okay, so a couple of important points to make here. One is, Brenda seconded the motion, but just because you second the motion doesn't mean that you are in favor of it. You just think that it's a topic that deserves discussion, or you may want to go on record, as Brenda did, as opposing the motion, which she obviously did. And the other,
I just point out, if she doesn't say anything and there is no second, it dies for want of a second.
Exactly.
So she's putting herself somewhat at risk when she seconds it. Not because she's taking a position on it at that point, but simply because if nobody else stood up and said anything, she wouldn't have to oppose it.
exactly. Good point. And the second thing is, in formal proceedings, each person has an opportunity to speak at least once before the same person can come around and speak again. And so if we had, and generally the chair likes to say, okay, who's for it, who's against it, and then alternate back and forth. And then after everybody has had a chance to speak, then Steve Grant could speak again, and then Brenda could speak again. Go ahead, Eileen.
If there's no more discussion, we will now vote on the motion. We will vote by raising our right hands. Let me restate the motion for you. The motion has been made and seconded to pay the expenses of up to $1,000 to send Bluegrass Division E Governor Steve Lanham to the International Convention in Malaysia next year. All in favor, please signify by raising your right hand. All opposed by the same sign. All in favor, and then all opposed. Motion fails by a count of 8-4.
Okay, so let me make some closing comments here. Number one is that the presiding officer does not participate in the debate in formal proceedings. And the reason for that is because we're going to have an impartial meeting being held, and the chair, because her position of authority, could influence the proceedings. So if the chair chooses to participate in the discussion, then she must vacate the chair, and then we'd ask someone else to come up and serve as chairman pro tem just for that time. And once that matter was disposed of, then she could resume the chairmanship and start running the meeting again. That's the first thing. The second thing is, the chair generally does not vote. They can, but generally they do not vote, except in two cases. You'll probably know that majority vote is required for most things to pass. There are certain procedural things we have to 2/3, but majority vote is generally required to pass a motion. And if the motion vote comes out to 6-6, that means that the majority does not exist. So the chair could at that point vote for the motion, make it 7-6, and then it would pass.
Does the chair recognize or state to the group that there is a tie?
Yes.
And the chair will now vote to break the tie?
Yes, and we're gonna see on the next slide about the 6 steps of making a motion. And one of those is actually announcing the vote, which I kind of glossed over here.
Yeah.
That's a good point. Then you take, and the chair chooses to vote, but the chair doesn't choose to vote, then it fails. So 7-6, it passes. Let's say the vote was 6-5. So against the motion, so the favor, or for the motion. So the motion passes, but the chair says, hang on a second, at 6-5, I would like to vote against the motion. And by voting against the motion, the vote now becomes 6-6 and causes the motion to fail. So the chair can vote to boost the motion so it passes, or the chair can vote so that the motion does fail if it's that close. So how's that?
If it's a tie, it fails.
That's right.
If it's a
Tie
tie,
fails, it's not a majority.
okay.
Half, that's
Or if
more than half.
If it required a 2/3 or some special majority,
Yeah.
the chair can always vote to create that special majority or break the special majority also.
Exactly. So that's the first script. We're going to need help from the other people, but just turn to the slide now, and we'll go over the 6 steps of making a motion. And this is my boring review, but we make the motion, we second the motion, which we did, and we had some chit-chatting going on before we actually placed it before the assembly. Then we discussed the motion, going back and forth, for and against, for and against. Then we vote on the motion, which we did, and then we announce the results of the vote, which I kind of glossed over, as I said. And then the chair can choose to vote if it causes that majority or causes fail. Everybody good with that? Because this is what we'll be doing in the business meeting this afternoon. And sometimes people just want to talk. And if they want to talk, then we need to go into a working session. And the assembly can choose to go into a working session, but that give and take of a working session and people just chit-chatting back and forth, throwing ideas back and forth, it's hard to do in a formal business session. So hopefully you have those things referred to a committee that does that on its own, then the committee comes back and makes its recommendation and reports its findings. Okay, so now we're going to move on. Well, let's look at the quote here. This is from Thomas Sowell. He's an economist and ecologist. He said, the least productive people are usually the ones that are most in favor of holding meetings. Next time, let's play again. Okay, I got some more scripts, and we need everybody on this one, so don't run off. Don't run off. Okay, Cynthia, I need you to come up. Okay, let's see here. Well, who wants to be Patty Black?
All right, Patty.
Okay.
Okay.
We need you to come up here. We need to have more people in the assembly now, and we need to have a chairman. Patty is chairing, okay? So you'll be right here. Okay, so who wants, you stand right there, okay, there we go. Got Patty. Who wants to be Laura Whalen? Want to be Laura? Okay. Who wants to be, I'll let you be Dana. Dana Davis, okay. Who wants to be Joan Jim? And, yeah, I think I Pat Mount for playing attention. I need Donnie Pryor here too.
Sure.
You want to play? I think he wants to play.
Okay, you need one?
I think that's all we need.
Okay, that sounds good.
Okay. I think that the names on there are wrong. I didn't hand out the names, but you know who you are, right?
Who am I?
You are Donnie Pryor.
Let's get her a seat.
So you need another seat here.
There we go.
Here's the assembly. You sit here, Jim. Is he playing? Okay. All right. So let me get my cheat sheets out here. Where did I put them? Okay. Script number 2. Patty Black. Go ahead.
What's in my bunch? What's in my bunch?
Let's see here. Okay, I'm sorry.
I'm not
I have,
sure.
yeah, you're not the chairman. I'm sorry. Yeah, you're gonna have to see Laura Whalen come on up here. There we go. Sorry, Laura. We had it confused here. You wanted to discuss the previous motion, but now you're coming back up. Okay.
Madam Chairman, I would like to Move that we start a bond walking scholarship fund for needy Toastmasters in District 40.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor to start a scholarship fund. Do I hear a second?
Excuse me, Madam Chairman, I'd like to raise a point of information.
Okay, Dana, let's hear it.
Toastmasters Protocol A2, Section 2, Part G states, funds may not be raised for social events, for other charitable causes, for setting up a fund, such as a scholarship or educational fund, nor to support and campaign for a candidate at any level inside or outside the organization.
Okay, let's stop here. So at this point, a point of information has been raised, and this is something that is germane to the topic at hand. And as Dana has pointed out, what we're proposing goes against our Toastmasters protocol, so it's really not business that we can conduct. So thank you, Dana, for that point of information.
Dana, you are exactly right. Thank you for pointing that out. Patty, as you can tell, that motion is out of order since it violates Toastmasters protocol. Let's move on.
And then, Chairman, I move that we send Bluegrass Division E Governor Steve Lanham to the International Convention in Malaysia in August.
I second the motion.
Let me ask you a question, Patty. Do you want to mention a specific dollar amount or the particular type of expenses you have in mind?
No, Madam Chairman, I am comfortable with the motion as stated.
So you notice here that the person making the motion, even though the chairman asked, do you want to state the wording just a little differently, the person chose not to, and that's perfectly within reason, within her rights.
Okay, it has been moved and seconded to send Bluegrass Division E Governor Steve Lanham to the International Convention in Malaysia in August. Any discussion? Yes, John Jean?
I move that we postpone the discussion of this motion until our next regularly scheduled business meeting so we can get some additional information about the cost of the convention,
So another point here.
not to mention the plane fare.
There you go. That's a good point. There's a subsidiary motion on the floor now. So we talked about all different types of motions. And this is a motion that kind of affects how the motion will proceed or when it's going to take place. A subsidiary motion takes precedence over a main motion. So Patty's motion to send yours truly to the convention in Malaysia next year is the main motion. So now, the motion has been made to postpone, and the official wording is to postpone to a certain time, or to postpone definitely. And when you postpone a motion, you can only postpone it, generally speaking, to later in the meeting or to the next regularly scheduled meeting. And if you look at the rules, it says if the next regularly scheduled meeting is more than 3 months out, you got to think about that too. Done.
Okay. Madam Chairman, I move to,
You're done to cry. Right here.
I second the motion.
Okay, it has been moved and seconded to postpone discussion of the main motion to send Steve Lanham to the International Convention in August until our next regularly scheduled meeting, so we can get additional information about the cost of the convention. Understand that we are voting to postpone and not voting on the motion itself. Any discussion?
I move to amend the motion to insert the wording that, and we pay the registration fee only.
I'm sorry, Dana, that motion is out of order.
Okay, so why is this motion out of order? Well, like I said, there's a certain precedence to Robert's Rules of Order. And we have subsidiary motions. You don't have your little chart here right now with you. But on the chart, you'll notice that the main motion is number 13. So anything above it takes precedence over the main motion. Well, postpone to a certain time is number 9. And the amend motion is number 11. So number 9 takes precedence over number 11. So at this point, a motion to amend is not in order because it doesn't follow the Robert's Rule of Order. This is where the order comes into play. Go ahead.
It has been moved and seconded to postpone the discussion of the main motion to the next meeting. Just so everyone knows what's going on, I will now restate the main motion. The motion is to send Bluegrass Division E Governor Steve Lanham to the International Convention in Malaysia in August. We will now vote on the motion to postpone this motion to the next meeting. All in favor, raise your right hands. All opposed, like sign. The motion fails. We are now back to discussing the main motion about sending Steve Lanham to the convention. Yes, the chair recognizes Daniel Davis.
Madam Chairman, I move that we amend the motion and insert the phrase, "and pay the registration fee only."
Thank you, Dana. That motion is now in order. Do we have a second?
I second the motion.
Okay, at this point, you notice that we disposed of motion, number 9, to postpone, and that's taken care of. So now the motion to amend the motion is in order, based on our list of precedents there.
It has been moved and seconded to amend the motion by inserting the following words, "and pay for the registration fee only." If the amendment passes, the main motion will read, "We move to send Bluegrass Division E Governor to the International Convention in Malaysia in August and pay for the registration fee only." Any discussion on the amendment to the motion? Let me stress here that we're discussing the amendment and not the motion. Yes, Donnie?
Okay now,
Okay.
Madam Chairman, I move to amend the amendment by adding the following wording to the motion. "And to pay up to $500 in expenses upon submission of documented receipts for those expenses, and to strike the word only."
I second the motion.
So let me jump in here just for a second. I know I don't have a stop here. But you notice that the wording is used here. We strike certain words, we insert certain words, and sometimes we say we substitute certain words too. So it kind of feels like, why are we doing all this, going back and forth? It seems like it's whimsical and capricious and unnecessary. In a small gathering like this, they say, if you have 6 or less people in a meeting, you can probably get away with not following Robert's Rules of Order. But when you get 10 to 12 people, then there's too many interactions, communication channels for things to work very well. Everybody's talking at the same time. So this is why we have the statement of the amendment, the restatement of the amendment when we call for the vote. So go ahead.
We have a secondary amendment to the main motion. It has been moved and seconded to strike the word "only" from the amendment and to add the wording "and to pay for up to $500 in expenses upon submission of documented receipts for those expenses." If the primary and second amendments pass, this is how the main motion will read. It has been moved and seconded to send Bluegrass Division E Governor to the International Convention in Malaysia in August and pay for the registration fee and to pay for up to $500 in expenses upon submission of documented receipts for those expenses.
Okay, so you can see now we have a main motion, we have an amendment to the motion, and we have a secondary amendment to the motion. We have a primary amendment and a secondary amendment. So at this point, it kind of gets confusing. So what you notice the chairman doing is she stated, well, here's the wording that we're going to add or subtract, in the case both. And here's how the motion will stand if the motion, the primary amendment, and the secondary amendment are approved. And it's stated clearly so that everybody can know exactly what we're voting on.
Any discussion on the secondary amendment to add the wording and to pay for up to $500 in expenses upon submission of documented receipts for those expenses? Yes, Daniel Davis?
Madam Chairman, I move that we make an amendment of striking the words "for those expenses" and inserting the words "for expenses related to lodging, travel, and food."
I'm sorry, Dana, but that motion is out of order. You are not allowed to offer an amendment at this time.
Notice how Dana's kind of a troublemaker. She needs to get her act together, doesn't she? Anyway, amendments can only go 2 levels to each other. Primary amendment and the secondary amendment. After that, you have to dispose of the secondary amendment before any other amendments can be brought to the floor. So that's why her amendment was out of order. And you notice here, it's getting confusing. And this is where the presiding officer, the parliamentarian, and, pity the poor secretary is trying to keep track of all this, have to make sure they're on top of everything in this process. Go ahead.
Okay, now, any more discussion? Seeing none, we will now vote. We are voting on the secondary amendment to add this wording, and to pay for up to $500 in expenses upon submission of documented receipts for those expenses to the amendment. If the primary and second amendments pass, this is how the main motion will read. It has been moved and seconded to send Bluegrass Division E Governor to the International Convention in Malaysia in August and pay for the registration fee and to pay for up to $500 in expenses upon submission of documented receipts for those expenses. Just to be clear here, we are not voting on the primary amendment or the main motion. We are voting on the secondary amendment. All in favor of the secondary amendment, please raise your right hands. All opposed by the same sign. The motion passes.
Okay, let's stop here. And I think we're going to go ahead and we're not going to finish out the scenario because we're running a little long time here. But let me say this, that you'll notice that the position that the presiding officer states the motion, states the primary amendment, states the secondary amendment, and then how it's all going to be coming out together if it's all approved. That's very important in large, formal, deliberative assemblies. So what's going to happen in the rest of the scenario, I've kind of talked through it. You'll go ahead and take your seats. I appreciate you guys. Let's give ourselves a hand. So what's going to happen is, so we voted on the secondary amendment. The rest of it, you can keep those sheets. The rest of the scenario, we're going to vote on the primary amendment. It passes. So now the motion has stated, which she just stated, where we pay the expenses and pending to the convention. The motion is stated. Now, we have the whole motion. We vote on the main motion, and at this point, the motion fails. So what's happened is we spent all that time amending, and then amending the amendment, and it would have been good if we could just have had that motion up front, specifically stated, which Patty decided she'd like to amend it just the way it was. Thank you, and we're not going to amend it, so we had to spend all that time amending the motion. In Robert's Rules of Order, books all say, well, it'd be good to just have one level amendment, but they do allow it too. So let's go on here, and we talked about what we just looked at here a little bit, and that is actually amend a motion. We have 2 levels of amendments, primary and secondary. We raised a point of information, which addresses a question or brings something that's interesting or applies to what's being discussed, and we postpone. And those last 2 are subsidiary. Well, actually, the 2 first and third are subsidiary motions. The middle one is an incidental motion because you bring it up at any time, whenever the incident occurs. Next slide. Any questions? We just covered the basics here. Like I said, you have a charter motion which I've given you, and you'll have one up here. And this covers more than most people want to know about parliamentary procedure. I'll be honest. So if you do what we got done today, you can probably handle 75% of the meetings that you're ever going to. Just like that. But if you learn this, yes.
I did have a question about item number 16, questions or points of information. Is that when someone in the assembly asks for further information?
There's 2 situations. One is a person who knows something about the situation. Let's say I'm the treasurer. And somebody says, I say we need to spend $500 on this. And that treasurer says, point of information, we only have $300 in the budget. That's the information had. Or it could be, and sometimes we take questions at point of information. Someone else could say, well, let's ask the treasurer, do we have enough money to cover this as a point of information? So that would be the 2 situations. someone's bringing it up to our attention or asking about it so we can know what's going on. So these are all in order. From 1 through 13 have to be done in order. Below that, 14 through 23 can be done at any time.
That's what it says in today.
So, I mean, you like I said, 40 minutes, it's like Toastmasters International. Bring the next slide up. Instead of questions, we say points of information. Let's go on to the next slide. And here's my contact information. I'm glad to send it to you, or if you want to get information about parliamentary procedure. Next slide. Henry M. Robert, we really don't care who he was, but the Galveston seawall, he helped build that. Let's go on. Okay. So originally, when he wrote the Robert's Rules of Order, he was a churchman. He was stationed all over the United States. He said, we need some consistency in different parts of the country. Nobody was doing it the same way. So he came up with his original book. He said, it's not going to be like 50 pages. Well, it's 176. Now, the 11th edition is over 700 pages. So there's a lot of stuff, like I said, most of it you'll never need to worry about. I would recommend, next slide, that you get and it's called officially the Robert's Rules of Order newly revised, because they revised it a lot. I would suggest you get the book Robert's Rules of Order in order. This is a very, very good resource. I mean, it's not the official Robert's Rules of Order, but it does cover what you need to know. It covers more than you need to know. It talks about how do we incorporate, how we do bylaws, how we do constitution, and all that kind of stuff, which most of that's already done by the time most of us get to a meeting and send it. But I would recommend this book. It's very good. It talks about how to make minutes, write minutes, and we don't do a very good job of that in general in our meetings.
That book is titled what?
I'm sorry?
The one you're recommending?
Yeah, it's the Robert's Rules of Order, newly revised and brief. Pass that around if you want. Take a glance at it. If you're really ambitious, I'll pass this official Robert's Rules of Order there. And now you get this stuff off Amazon or whatever. Here's a tripod about, and again, everything, more than anybody wants to know about Robert's Rules of Order. You can take a peek at that too. I do want those back, okay? Toastmasters has a module called Parliamentary Procedure in Action. And it's actually pretty good, to be honest. And if you can order it, I think it's like $10, $15, and has 10 booklets for participants, a leader's guide, and you also get the chart of motions. And since this is copyrighted material, I couldn't actually copy it, so I gave you my own version of it, which I think is much pretty good. But anyway, so you get the chart of motions. So those are some resources about parliamentary procedure. And like I said, we don't have time to go over everything, but let's see what the next slide says. Okay. Any more questions? Yes.
This is a very formal procedure.
Yes, it is.
In most of our day-to-day business meeting, most people have probably not even heard of Robert's Rule.
Exactly.
How would you instill some kind of rule to your fellow colleagues so they can be accomplished?
Okay. That's a good question. And actually in the Robert's Rules of Order, the big book there, it tells us, and I was guilty of not doing this, it tells us just because I know about Robert's Rules of Order and parliamentary procedure doesn't mean I should browbeat people and get things done that I want to and make people look at it. It says, if you know the rules, be kind. Don't try to show off, which I did. I admit I was guilty of that. So it's good to make sure you formally start the meeting, I think, and it's good to make sure that we have a motion in a second. And like if you have our executive committee meeting, we have like 7 people there. Do we need to do all the rules and stuff? I think it's good to, but a lot of clubs don't do that. Then you have the club meetings where they have the business session at the beginning. And they kind of gloss it over a little bit. But I think it's good training because at 2 o'clock we're going to go into our district business meeting. And I don't know if you were at the one last year, but it's, we need some help in running our meetings. And so I think if we do things in small areas, it helps us in large.
I point out, most organizations specify that they are supposed to conduct their business meetings in Robert's Rules of Order.
Right.
You want to know good endorsement of Robert's Rules of Order? The Congress of the United States doesn't use it. It has its own rules.
Exactly.
We'd be better off if they used Robert's. But aside from that, the kind of informal meeting you're talking about, that organization probably has not adopted Robert's rules. So you just, most of it's common sense. Go ahead and use common sense, and it'll work out for you. And like I said, there are different rules of order. You know, Cynthia's gonna say that, I'm sorry, I stole your thunder. You know, there's Jeffersonian rules of order, there's Congress, United States Senate rules of order, there's rules of order used in Canada, in England. Roberts doesn't have the corner of the market on it, but District 40 Toastmasters has adopted Robert's Rules of Order as its official parliamentary procedure. That answer your question? Toastmasters International has adopted.
Okay, I thought they did, but I didn't know if that's right.
For all of us, yes.
Okay, I want to make sure you, thank you for clarifying that.
And that means that no matter whatever Toastmaster meeting we're at least we know that this is the guideline.
Mm-hmm. Right. Okay. Any other questions?
I think more of our leaders should be in these proceedings.
Excuse me?
I think more of our leaders should be in these
Oh, yeah. Oh,
proceedings.
well, like I said, you got Kareem Ellis and you got somebody on TV talking about how to organize the closet. So, anyway, meeting. Okay, go ahead.
Are you going to talk about where the minutes are kept?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's do this. We're finishing off. I'm not telling you in suspense, dude. Hey, here's the definition that we hope we can get away from as far as meetings are concerned. I don't know if you've ever seen this, but meetings where the minutes are kept and the hours are lost. Hopefully we can get away from that. Okay? Thank you very much. It's been a very good audience. We have evaluation forms. If you fill those out, they'll be good. Give them to Gene here. And if I can have the books and the book here. Thank you.